Hello and welcome everyone to a career in medtech engineering. Engineers Ireland is delighted to be presenting this webinar this evening with CPL. And just a reminder that today's webinar is recorded. The presentations will be recorded. The questions and answers section will not be recorded. Please don't forget to mute your microphone and please contribute to the questions section, and I'll bring up your questions on your behalf during the Q&A. Just some context as to why we're doing the kind of graduate and final year webinar series is that I guess it's a more difficult time than ever before to engage with our members, but we find this is a great way of kind of helping people plan out future steps in their career. And this is just one part of a wide series that's exploring a really vast area that engineering is. And you can have a look at all our videos which go up on our YouTube channel. To plug the offering that we're giving all graduate and student members, we're giving them a free transfer to graduate membership. What this means is that you can save €700 in your first 4 years of your of your graduate career. And I guess we do this because we're in Engineers Ireland, we're really committed to your long-term professional development. It's super simple to do. I'll show you what it would look like if you go on your mobile phone, you log into your Engineers Ireland profile on the website, and all you need to do is click the button that says become a full member, and you'll be brought through to how you can verify your qualifications and get put to the appropriate grade. So just a quick plug of the graduate membership discount. So I'm kind of standing in the way of the exciting panel that we have tonight. So without further ado, I really want to get into it. We have Tara Keedy, who is a research and development engineer at Hook Bio Limited. We have Stanislav Manzia, who is a process development engineer at Boston Scientific. We have Dara Bugle, an associate director at CPL. And we have Valerie O'Brien, who is a consultant at Accenture, but is formerly a Medtronic engineer. So yeah, I guess I'm going to stop sharing now. And
cool. So, hi everyone, good evening, and thanks for everyone for coming along, and I hope everyone's doing well in these strange times of COVID and all. But just a quick introduction myself. So, my name is Stan Manza. I have completed my 4-year bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering at NUI Galway. So then I went on to do my master's in biomedical engineering from which I graduated in 2019. And then shortly after, I started working at Boston Scientific as a process development engineer, and I am currently still working here. So just for my presentation topics today, I'll just talk about some of my relevant university projects. And then I'll have a main focus on kind of with the work experience, kind of the work you might be seeing to do as a graduate, and I might just do a touch on working with COVID. And any questions you can feel free to ask. But I know there's a Q&A at the end, so feel free to ask them there. So in my final year, we had a Teams project that was sponsored by Boston Scientific. And this project, it entailed designing a frame and a flow loop that was capable of simulating a beating heart model. So the kind of work performed on this project was to generate your bill of materials, to do up your frame design, a flow loop design, and any then testing on and experiments on your model iterations. And then as a result, you got your beating heart simulator that was capable of recording and creating physiological heart pressures. And I just include some pictures here from our setup in one of the labs in NUIG that we had. So the reason I kind of left this in to talk about it is because since this project was done with Boston Scientific, kind of a lot of this work is very similar to the work that you might come across in a medical engineering company. So I just thought it was quite relevant to talk about. And I know, Michal, you were saying there's a good few final year students here today. So I suppose, all your final year projects, whether you're doing it with a company or not, I'd say a lot of that kind of experimentation work and data collection, it's quite relevant to what you might see when you go off working in R&D or a new product development, process development kind of work. So I'll just talk about some work experience and kind of working through the pandemic, because I know it's a big part of our lives now at this stage. So just before I start into our the kind of projects I worked in and give you an overview of them, I just want to talk about how, Boston Scientific, and I suppose any kind of engineering company or any company out there now, and that they're dealing with this COVID crisis very well and acting quickly and getting all your necessary restrictions in place and providing your weekly updates and information. And to date, there's been no there's been zero community kind of transmissions within the company. So all that great prep work and timely response really shines through. So it's quite a safe place working in. So overall, personally, my work life doesn't change significantly working through COVID. So I know at work we have the option now to work from home if you don't need to be on site, but I myself find myself to be on site most of the days, 4 if not 5 days a week, and that's for kind of stuff like testing or any experiments, setting up equipment, working on a manufacturing line. And I feel like it's nice. In my opinion, it's nice, and it provides some kind of normality to your day-to-day life kind of thing. But like because I remember, when all this COVID started back in March, there was a good 2 to 3 weeks period where I myself and other people were working full time, working from home. So it's nice to be in the office more often. And I suppose the most significant change is that all your meetings are online now instead of in person. So like before COVID, you'd physically have to walk to your meetings, and that can take up a lot of your time today. But now it's all at your desk, and it's a good positive change, I suppose. But just talking about some projects I worked on in Boston Scientific. So I've been working in Boston Scientific for 16 months now, and over this time I have worked on 2 projects, of which I'll give you a short description of and talk about some of the work I've done as a process development engineer. So Vichy was the first project I worked on. And Vichy is a nitinol stent that is used to treat peripheral vascular disease. So any kind of obstruction and occlusions in the venous system. It's a self-expanding stent. It has high radial strength to meet anatomy challenges. So I suppose if you can imagine, since this implant is going in your upper thigh region, in your veins, you can imagine, if you're sitting, exercising, doing any movement, you want the stent to keep its shape and not collapse. So the nitinol material, along with the high radial strength, allows it to resist that compression and stay open. So the kind of work I did as a new engineer for my first 10 months working in Boston after graduating was, first of all, familiarize yourself with the product, train to any procedures, and seeing the manufacturing line. And to me, I feel like familiarizing yourself with the product, seeing the manufacturing line would be quite important, because if you're going to meetings and you're talking to people and you're not fully you're not fully aware of what all the different parts are called and that kind of stuff, it'd be very difficult to kind of grasp and follow things. So, and then I suppose other things, like there's a lot of process characterization work and design of experiments, things like testing, and you'll have your protocol drafting, report writing. And a lot of there's a lot of your Excel work and Minitab work that you might do in college. So and then other stuff, there's any kind of risk analysis and working closely with any product builders on the line if you're generating work instructions, so that kind of thing. So then my second project I worked on was the Watchman LAC device, which is your left atrial appendage closure device. And your left atrial appendage it's kind of like a pocket just on the left side of the heart, as you can see in that picture there. And so in atrial fibrillation, what can happen is that a blood clot can form within this appendage and travel outside the heart. And this can get lodged in the brain and cause a stroke. And so this Watchman device is like a safety net that can prevent any blood clots from leaving the left atrial appendage and traveling. So it's kind of an alternative to long-term anticoagulation therapy that helps reduce stroke risk in patients. And similar with this, when you find yourself going on to a new project, it's almost like backtracking a bit and starting over again in regards to that, you need to familiarize yourself with the product, and again, going down to see the manufacturing line, the process and steps and how things are built, and getting your kind of lingo right. But again, after your first 10 months, depending on what you're working on, some of the things do repeat themselves. So like again, with this new project, you see yourself doing any design of experiments. There'll be some, again, testing, measuring your Minitab analysis work and Excel work. But then some new stuff like you could, like in my instance, dealing with external vendors and getting any fixturing in, new equipment in, and then dealing with calibration and maintenance to draft up documents, get any equipment in the labs or on the manufacturing lines calibrated and maintained, I suppose. And then any other things like equipment health and safety and electrical safety assessments. Just decided to put this in. I know a lot of this stuff might be general, but I feel like if I was to give my top advice to any new engineers who are starting work, I would say, first of all, get to know your team, because your team will be the first people that you can go to and ask any questions. And then brings me to the second point: don't be afraid to ask questions, because especially as a new engineer, everyone around you, they're quite aware, and you're there to train and to learn and to progress your career. So don't be afraid to ask questions, and then don't be afraid of taking on any new tasks that you might have no or little experience in, because those ones can be the most rewarding and can really prove your worth, I suppose. That's my presentation there. If you have any questions, I know there's a Q&A at the end, so feel free to ask then. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. That was super. And I always think that, like, please God, I'd never have to get some sort of medical device put into me at any stage of my life. But like, I'm always happy knowing that like such professionals like yourself are looking after the process, and it's always like reassuring seeing like just like how academically rigorously you're trained and just the passion you put into it.
Oh yeah. Like I think one thing I forgot to mention there, you're constantly training to procedures just to make sure any kind of work you're doing, you're trained to. So it's a lot of regulations in place and kind of that security, I suppose.
Excellent, Stan. Okay, well, we're going to have a go at Tara's presentation, and now I am going to share it from my screen. So hopefully this won't be as mean on your bandwidth. So Tara, over to you.
Brilliant.
Oh, there.
Brilliant, thanks. So just to start off with a bit about me and my background. So I'm originally from Galway, and in terms of my education, I started my bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering in NUIG in 2015 and graduated in 2019. And I then went straight on to do a master's degree in biomedical engineering in NUIG as well. And I finished that in May of this year. So no more than the rest of you, I'm sure it was a strange time moving to online learning mid-semester, but we managed and we got through it. And to those of you that are still in college now, I'm sure you've adjusted to this new reality, and I commend you because it's not easy. And so then in terms of work experience, as part of my undergraduate degree in NUIG, in third year, we had to complete an 8-month placement. So I did mine in Medtronic, and I was working in the manufacturing department as a manufacturing engineering technician, and was mostly working with balloon catheters. And I really enjoyed my time there. And as a third year student, I had no prior engineering experience. So I was thrown right into the deep end and learned so much over the 8 months. So it was really great experience, and was definitely something that helped me in interviews, as I was able to refer back to my time there and the things that I'd learned from working there. So then I started working in my current role as an R&D engineer in a startup company called Hook Bio at the end of September. So I'll soon have 3 months done there, and I'm loving it so far, and I've learned so much already as well. And it's been great to be exposed to working in a smaller startup company environment and having that bit of extra responsibility. So you can move on to the next slide, please. So I wanted to talk about the project that I completed as my master's thesis, which was done as part of the Bioinnovate program. I think Stan mentioned it as well in NUIG. So doing this project is what made me realize that I firstly wanted to work in research and development and the design of medical devices, but also that I wanted to work in a startup company where you get to have a real input and be involved in a bit of everything. So the project involved the design and development of a medical device and taking it through the full product development cycle from concept right through to commercialization. So there was 3 main phases: identify, invent, and implement. So everyone was split into groups, and each group had their own specific disease to work with. So ours was chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. And we had to identify current unmet clinical needs in the area, so of diagnostics, patient care, treatment, prevention for the disease. So we did this by talking to consultants, doctors, nurses, and conducting our own online research. So we then had to brainstorm different ideas and develop a novel final concept solution and a detailed design and carry out relevant testing to prove that our concept actually worked. And then we finally had to create a realistic development plan, financial plan, business plan, and proposed clinical trials to bring our device to the market. So this project, it was carried out over the full duration of the master's degree, so over the 9 months, and it was extremely full on, but it gave a great understanding of how the process of bringing a medical device to market in the real world actually works. So the best part about the project was that although it was somewhat hypothetical, it was always treated as if it was a real medical device, and some groups, including my own, with the help of our supervisor, played with the idea of even taking the idea further and developing the device more in order to create a startup company ourselves. So it really gave me something to talk about in interviews, and as we developed a lot of skills in this project and we gained knowledge in the areas of design, regulatory affairs, financial planning, clinical trials, and business modeling, and like other things that we mightn't have actually done in our previous years of college or in previous projects. So you can move on to the next slide, please. So these are just some examples of different projects or assignments that I completed in college over the years. So some of you might even have completed the same ones or similar, but I found the main thing that I was asked to talk about in any interviews I had was my projects or assignments. So as a graduate, you won't have much work experience. So I recommend including projects on your CV that are relevant to the role that you're applying for and that highlight the use of the required skills for that role. So I knew that I wanted an R&D role. So on my CV, I included projects that were highly design focused, and then I discussed them in great detail during interviews. So like you could talk about the CAD drawings you did, the rationale behind your designs, what you were trying to achieve and how you did it, the materials you chose, and any FEA analysis carried out or any testing that you did. Some of you have mentioned there's a lot of final years, so I'm sure a lot of you are currently working on final year projects at the moment, and I presume many of you have to set up experiments and record results for that. So that's definitely something that you could talk about in interviews that would help you get a job. Next slide, please. So I'll just give a brief overview of Hook Bio. So it's a startup company that spun out from UL and was founded in 2014 by Professor Mark Davies in Stokes Laboratories. So the company is currently developing microfluidic-based technologies for drug screening and in conjunction with 3D cell culture, with the aim of hopefully replacing the need for animal testing. So the technology, it's adaptable to a range of applications such as disease modeling, drug discovery, microbial screening, or personalized drug optimization. So Hook Bio they actually won Enterprise Ireland's One to Watch Award, Big Ideas Showcase in 2018, and the National Startup MedTech Award in 2018. And in January 2019, they won 1.9 million in the DTIF fund in collaboration with the Centre of Advanced Photonics and Process Analysis and NUIG. So we currently have 9 employees working in Shannon, which includes engineers, scientists, and finance staff. So the team have a whole different range of backgrounds, including microbiology, biochemistry, precision manufacturing, mechatronics, mechanical engineering, and of course myself, biomedical engineering. Move on to the next slide, please. So my duties as an R&D engineer at Hook Bio vary from day to day, which kind of makes things nice and interesting, and it's kind of the one thing that I kind of like about this company. So my day can consist of CAD work, research, testing prototypes, being in the lab, culturing cells, 3D printing, or a range of other things. So I have a short list here of some of the typical things that I might be doing. So there's CAD, 3D printing, Arduino coding, so building electronic circuits, machining prototypes with a CNC or a lathe or the mill. So that this is something that I have never done before, so it's kind of great to try something new and get a bit of training in a new area. prototype testing and development, setup and design of test rigs and experiments, cell culturing, cell imaging with different microscopes. So I'd be using a fluorescent microscope quite a bit. Fluidics testing, so working with a lot of valves and pumps. And of course, researching current literature to make sure we're up to date and on trend with everybody else. Next slide, please. So obviously, for confidentiality reasons, I can't go into too much detail or show you any pictures, but an idea of some of the projects that I'm working on at the moment would be, so I'm currently creating a rig to test a prototype to ensure that it's fluidically sealed and there are no leaks. So I'll be testing firstly that the different seals that we have work and that there's no leaks. And then I'd also be testing the minimum pressure it takes to cause the system to leak. So another thing I'm also working on would be optimizing the right geometry for a mold we're designing for casting material to be used for culturing cells. So I'm testing different mold shapes and thicknesses, and I'm trying to find the right geometry to allow for cell growth, which while also allowing for optical clarity under a microscope. So it's very interesting, but challenging, but it's rewarding, hopefully. Next slide, please. So Michal has told me that there are a few mechanical engineers that will be here listening today. So interested to learn more about how they could fit into a medtech company. So the first thing I would say is that you don't need a deep understanding of biology or medicine to work in a medtech company, because mechanical input, it's required for the majority of engineering projects in terms of things like motion control, electronics, fluids, pneumatics, machinery, manufacturing. And there's especially a need for mechanical engineers in larger medtech companies with large scale manufacturing operations and huge operating lines full of machines. So I definitely wouldn't be ruling out a career in medtech if you have a mechanical engineering degree, because the two courses are very closely linked and cover a lot of the same material. Next slide, please. So just following on from my previous slide, I have a list of the various modules that I completed in my 3rd and 4th year of college. And I have the modules that are also completed by mechanical engineers highlighted in italics. So this is just to show that there's a huge overlap between the two degrees, with the biomeds just having that extra bit of biology knowledge. So transitioning from college to work, it can be daunting, but I've actually found it to be a nice transition. And by the time you finish your degree, I can assure you, you'll be well ready to get stuck into a job after all the studying. So since starting work, there's been at least one thing I've learned from each module that I completed in college that I have had to apply to the workplace. So it's all much more applicable than you might think at the time. So you're learning everything for a reason. And everyone starting in a new job will have to be trained in at the beginning. So no matter how much experience that they might have, you still need to be trained in. So don't feel bad for being the newbie. Everyone is at some point. And also ask plenty of questions. Like, people actually prefer you to ask questions because it shows that you're interested, that you're eager to learn, and it shows that you'll do the job right and that you're listening to what they're saying. And finally, be confident in all the knowledge that you've learned over the years and that your ability to use it, but at the same time, still be open to learning more. Next slide, please. So that's it from me. So thank you for listening. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them at the end in the Q&A, or you can reach me on my email that given at the start of this presentation. So thanks a million.
Thank you so much, Tara. And like, that was really fascinating. And just while Daryl's getting his presentation ready to go, like, one thing I've definitely taken away from that is that it sounds so interesting to be beginning your career in Hook Bio, and that really that sense that as you grow as an employee, whatever the company's growing to, which sounds just so exciting.
Exactly, it's very exciting. Hopefully big things in the future.
Well, absolutely. Well, without further ado, I'd love to hand it over to Daryl from CPL.
Brilliant. Thanks, Michal. Thanks, Tara and Stan. Very interesting to hear the work that you're doing. I suppose briefly, just to introduce you to CPL and who we are and what we do. CPL will be the largest recruitment agency in Ireland. We'd have an international portfolio as well. And in really simple terms, our job is to get people jobs. So we work on behalf of different companies in different sectors to help them find the best people for their organizations. In my own role, I manage our CPL Galway branch. So we would have a heavy client base in the med tech, med device sector. Also, we would work with other companies and other industries as well locally. So it gives us a unique position. Instead of looking at one company, we can see different styles, different types, and I suppose different interests for potential candidates or talent that are looking to enter into the jobs market. Even very quickly, if we just think about Stan's working in Boston Scientific, really massive organization. I think they've 3,000 people employed here in the local market, and you've got Tara, who's at total flip. She's in a startup mode, working with an organization of only 9 people. So coming out of a very similar course profile, similar experience, but having the opportunity to work in very different companies. So I suppose one of the big messages for myself to anybody that's listening today is there's lots of opportunity out there for you. And I suppose, again, to look at Tara and Stan as people in the market, they've come into the workforce very quickly. They haven't really had a lag time, from what I can see, from when they graduated through to coming into employment, which I think is indicative of the market and indicative of the demand from employers for talent. So I suppose a lot of comfort in that, maybe compared to other industries at the moment, such as our hospitality or retail colleagues, who are probably coming into a very different work environment. So I suppose certainly something to consider. I suppose probably listen to Michal and listen to the profile of the audience. We have a lot of people in college or recently graduated, so you're at the start of your job search effectively. So starting is the starting point, which is to just do a little bit of groundwork and make sure you've got some of the key documents and details ready to go that you're going to need to enter the jobs market. And I suppose the most important one is your CV. As a graduate, you might say, look, I don't have any experience per se, or I haven't got a massive work history, but you still do need a CV. It is the standard document that's used by all companies and all organizations for you to enter into the jobs market. So project work, to Tara's point, very important. In an interview situation with someone who's graduating, you're going to focus on the subjects, you're going to focus on the projects that you've worked on. You'll also focus on other work experience. It's not necessarily from the same environment, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So making sure your CV is up to date, is correctly formatted. Very simple issues, including your contact details. For example, I had a candidate last week who's 20 years experience, very senior in an organization, who sent me their CV and they'd no email address or phone number. So it's the real basic stuff that you need to get right. Luckily, you're probably involved with a university or a third level institute that have careers departments, and they've people there who'll offer to work on your CV and support you in your CV formatting for free. I'd very much encourage you to use that service while you have the opportunity, because I suppose if you come outside of the university world, you'll pay €100 for the similar service. So certainly worth using what's available to you. LinkedIn is ever so popular, and I suppose my advice to anybody in the situation who's graduating or recently graduated is everyone you meet along the way who could potentially help you find a job, make sure you use LinkedIn to connect with them, and that'll help you build up a network, a virtual network. And the other things to do is on LinkedIn then is to just share events like tonight's event. Just share that you've gone to the effort of attending this event, or if you're at a presentation, or if you have something interesting to say, just share every now and again your thought process. And again, that will build up your own. You'd be surprised how many people would look at something like LinkedIn and start to build a perception of somebody, and you can build a perception of yourself as a thought leader or an engaged party in a particular industry very quickly just through your activity on that particular network. And then researching, I suppose it's to my point of, do you want to work at a big company? Do you want to work in a startup company? And ultimately, before you would go to any interview, to make sure you do your research. Do you know anybody that already works in the company that you're going to interview for? Can you do research on what their products are? Do you know what their culture is, what their mission is, what their values are? All very simple things that can be done online these days, and I suppose will help you stand out in an interview situation. Okay. The employment landscape, to my point, talent is in demand. Engineering talent is in very high demand across the medical tech landscape and beyond as well. If we look at closely related industry like pharma, for example. I know a lot of the audience here this evening are from the west of Ireland, although I do see some people popping up with a Dublin location. The west of Ireland uniquely is the global leader in medical device and medical tech industry. From a European perspective, there's no other city that has as many jobs in employment as we have in Galway, which is a unique achievement. And again, you've got a hotbed of talent and people who would have probably started out in the bigger companies, for example, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, Craigana, and people who've gone into those companies, gained lots of experience, and then spun out into their own startups. And then you've got a really nice startup culture spinning out of universities, spinning out of incubation hubs, and I suppose starting to support that ecosystem as well. In regards to job opportunities, there's loads. There's the scope to do, for example, taking a process from the start, R&D jobs, into the manufacture of a product, manufacturing engineer jobs, customer experience at the tail end of the process then as well, in regards to maybe vigilance engineers or quality engineers that have to look at the guarantee of quality and guarantee of performance, a little bit to like Stan's point a little bit earlier on. So even though you may not have done biomedical engineering per se, if you've done mechatronic engineering or mechanical engineering or manufacturing engineering, there's plenty of scope to get into the industry. And I suppose the opportunity thereafter is if you specifically are looking to come in and work in the biomedical element of the engineering function. A lot of the bigger companies, once you're in there, will have support plans in regards to career development and learning and development opportunities for you to go back to college and to maybe cross qualify into a different area, and that would present you with other opportunities. So I think the key for someone in that situation is just to get into into a company that is focused on learning and development and is focused on career development. Bear in mind though, you will have to prove your worth, to put the phrase on it, and spend some time obviously learning the ropes, showing your commitment to the company, showing that you're someone that they should invest in. But again, typically a lot of the bigger companies and even the smaller companies, to be fair, that we're talking to, they're very keen to invest in their talent and to the workforce. And to come back, we've got world-class companies operating here in Ireland, and specifically again here in the west of Ireland in the Galway area. Primarily, obviously, there's operations throughout the country, Athlone, Limerick, Dublin as well. So look, I think there's plenty of scope. Very, very healthy employment landscape considering what's happened this year. It's held up really, really well. Plenty of job opportunities as well. So coming into next year, we're not seeing anything different or indicated anything different from the customers that we work with or the companies essentially that employ engineering talent. I suppose to look at what companies would look for from a graduate, or to look at someone who maybe doesn't have a body of work experience in the relevant sector, there's two elements really. There's the hard skills, they're your degrees, they're your projects, they're your masters, they're the certificates that say you can do or you're qualified to do from an educational standard. I'd always describe your degree or your masters as the opportunity that opens the door, but you still have to walk through the door. And this is where soft skills become really important. So when you're hiring a graduate, there's a certain amount of a gamble. You don't know, and sometimes the actual graduate themselves don't know what's going to happen in the next 12 months, even though there's career plans there. So the big thing really that a company will be looking for, I suppose, is they're looking at commitment. So they're going to invest time, energy, and ultimately financial resources in developing you and your career. And the hardest part of that journey is typically in year 1 to year 2. So I suppose if someone's coming in and they're maybe thinking about traveling in a year's time, or they're not 100% sure if it's the role for them, that can be an off-put, because you're going to have a lot of time and energy and resources spent with that person to get them to the point where they need to be in order for them to really add value and to step up into a kind of a fully functioning member of the workforce. So I suppose a lot of companies will look for commitment, and if you are thinking about traveling, or that's something you want to do, maybe do it first before jumping into the career, into the job. And I suppose again, again for yourself to get a good 2 or 3 year run at a role or in a company or at a particular sector before you do something like traveling is a better option than maybe just doing 12 months, because you're going to lose out and the company are going to lose out, to be honest. They are looking for people who are career orientated, to my point around learning and development and looking to develop yourself and to maybe go back and do further education or to maintain your CPD. And again, being a member of Engineers Ireland is something that you can help stand out with, to say that you are investing in your career and you're with your professional organisation body. You're attending the events that are being made available to you as well. So career orientated. But I suppose the biggest one, and this is the one that anybody who would hire staff will ultimately look for, especially with someone with minimal experience: attitude. A positive attitude. Someone who's willing to work, maybe do a couple of extra hours around just the learning piece, your self-learning, getting up to speed with what's required, and just generally bringing a positive can-do attitude to it. You know, candidates can sometimes come with a sense of self-entitlement. I've got my master's, give me a job. That's not what most employers are looking for. You've worked really, really hard to get to that stage, and everyone appreciates that and everyone knows that. But you still have to keep grafting, and you still have to do that with a smile on your face. And that's really what most companies are looking for. And again, if you look around, if you look at a different environment like a football team, or even if you work in a different industry, maybe you're working in retail or hospitality, the people you work with and are easiest to work with and are the most enjoyable to work with are those that bring a good attitude to their and a good passion to what they're doing on a daily basis. And that's what every employer is looking for as well in regards to anyone that they look to hire. Not so much for the minute maybe, but why people would work with a recruiter. I suppose probably one of the key benefits is the insight we can offer. We tend to have specialist recruiters in industry. So if I look at my own team, for example, we have a science and engineering team. We have a person who specializes in quality engineering. We have a specialist in manufacturing engineering. We have a specialist in the reg affairs sector. So you're working with people that have a really deep understanding of the employment landscape within the particular verticals that are there. And I suppose, again, they can give you information around salary expectations, coaching through an interview process, which is something we do a lot because every company interviews differently. Every company has their own way. Also around what opportunities could be there for you in time. So I suppose, again, it's really to give you an insight and ultimately to support you to get the best possible job you can get. And that's why I suppose we would find a lot of people do work with recruiters, especially when they're kind of looking to make their first move after their initial maybe 1 to 2 or 3 years experience. 2 or 3 years normally being the bracket there. Thank you. That's myself. I know we've got a questions and answer section coming up a little bit later on. I might just add that after the event, Micheál will be sending you on some further information. We've a specific CV interview handbook that we've co-created for this event. And we've also got for the current environment video interviewing handbook, and both of those documents get very, very strong feedback from people that we work with. So they'll be sent on to you after the event as well, with some more information to expand on what I've discussed so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darryl. And while Valerie's getting her slides ready, I just I want to highlight like what a valuable resource that is. I had a sneak peek before the event, and I think like no matter what level of career you're at, like it's a really valuable document. And also just to say thank you, like I know I've worked with you before on the global engineers side of things, and you've been an incredibly important resource for people who've come to Galway from overseas to work in the medtech industry. So just to kind of acknowledge that and thank you. So yeah, let's go on to Valerie then. And Valerie, it's over to you.
Perfect, thank you, Micheál. My name is Valerie, and what I wanted to talk to you about today is my experiences as a graduate in the medtech industry. I graduated 4 years ago, and some of the milestones throughout my career and learnings as well to share back with you. So I suppose there's been a couple of questions already in the chat of going into medtech from a different area of speciality. So I actually did my undergrad in medicinal chemistry. So quite early on in my undergrad, I knew that a career in chemistry wasn't for me. So during my second year, I saw a summer placement in Medtronic as an evaluation technician in their return goods investigation lab. that I thought sounded really interesting, and I applied for, although it was totally different to chemistry to me, but something I was very interested in. So in that role, I worked in their lab where faulted devices from the field get returned to for you to perform an investigation and determine the root cause for the failure. So I really, really enjoyed it. I knew it was something that I enjoyed a lot more than chemistry in my undergraduate I was doing at the time. And while I was there, I was speaking to other student interns who were doing a placement similar to how Tara mentioned. I think you did your placement with Medtronic as well. And that was built in as a co-op into their undergraduate, which was news to me. We didn't have a co-op in my undergraduate degree. So I made the difficult decision to defer a year of college, and I actually did a 9-month placement off my own bat with Medtronic in their return goods lab. So it was a difficult decision to make, but I'm definitely really glad I did it. I think a lot of the time when you're in medtech, you work with one particular device and you really specialize on that device. Whereas working in this lab meant I worked with the whole suite of products that they manufactured in the Galway site. And I really got the opportunity to literally rip them apart and understand how they worked. And it really helped fill in some of those knowledge gaps I had from not doing an undergrad in medtech. So the following summer, I went on to do another placement, again with Medtronic, but this time in their MDR and vigilance team. So this was, again, totally different to anything I'd done before. It wasn't a lab job, it was an office job. So it was assessing patient harm and reporting those to FDA and other regulatory bodies. So it was still a great experience and great to see another side of the business. So I went into my final year then in September 2015, pretty certain that I wanted a career in medtech, but very aware that I had never really tried anything else up to that point. I hadn't even tried a different medtech company. So I was looking out for other opportunities to try other things and grow my skills. And I saw that the DCU Rhine Academy were doing a hackathon, which for any of you who aren't familiar with what a hackathon is, it's basically a startup weekend where they bring a group of people together, and over the course of 48 hours, you form teams, you pick a problem to work on, and you design a company that will solve that problem. So it was very out of my comfort zone. I learned a lot that I'd never heard of before. So I learned about design thinking, which I think is something that's become a lot more common in the last couple of years. Back then it was quite new. And I also was interacting with a lot of peers who were from business courses. And one thing that really struck me was that they had a lot more soft skills developed, as Darryl mentioned in your presentation. They were much better at things like presentations than I was. I think that the business degrees kind of afforded a lot more time to building those skills than science and engineering degrees did. So that was something that kind of resonated and stayed with me throughout my final year. So when I graduated then in 2016, I was selected to represent the Republic of Ireland in the Clinton International Summer School, which I thought would be a really interesting opportunity and a really great chance to build some of those soft skills that I felt I was lacking, as well as meeting people from all over the world. So it was a really fantastic experience, and it was modelled again through design thinking, so designing a solution that would benefit your society. So it really helped me build out a more in-depth knowledge of the design thinking methodology. So I then went on to do the Medtronic QA graduate program, which if any of you haven't heard of before, I would definitely recommend looking into it. It's a really great program. They take a relatively small intake each year and really focus on building your soft skills and as well your cross-functional knowledge. So it's designed by doing a rotational program across departments, and as well you're always taking on new projects and new trainings to keep developing your knowledge and your skill set. So I really, really enjoyed the program. One thing I found was that everyone on the program had a similar undergraduate, so either engineering or science, and they each had placement as well in medtech companies or in pharma companies. But the one thing that really gave me an edge were the initiatives like the DCU Rhine Academy and the Clinton International Summer School that I had done. It gave me a bit of a different perspective to everybody else in my program, and I actually implemented design thinking in one of my projects, which was the first time that any of the management had seen the design thinking methodology, and they were really interested in learning more about it. So they actually had me training people on site on design thinking and I ended up presenting to the Vice President of Medtronic on the methodology as well and how it could be used in QA for more so non-technical problems that we're traditionally using the DMAIC problem-solving process. So in a company the scale of Medtronic, that was a really huge opportunity for me. Huge opportunity for anybody, but to really build my brand across Medtronic. So I suppose one thing I just wanted to highlight is the importance as well of focusing on what makes you different to everybody else, or what's the difference that you can bring to the role. And definitely when you're doing your applications as well, it's obviously really important to make sure you're ticking the box on the technical skills, but bringing in your additional personality and your own personal experiences as well. So as I got to the end of my graduate program, I reflected back on my career in Medtronic as I decided what would be the next steps for me. So at that point I'd been working there for 4 years. And when I really thought about it, whilst I really enjoyed it, what I liked a lot about it was that I had opportunities to work on projects and other continuous improvement initiatives. Whereas to continue my career in QA in Medtronic, I would have to start to really specialise on something and kind of move away from that type of project work. So I decided to move over to project management and join the Accenture Consulting graduate program, which is another, it felt like a bit like a step sideways. I was starting back at the start of another graduate program, but maybe just another bit of advice as well. If any of you do find yourself in a similar situation where you want to move industry or company, but you don't want to lose your career progress, sometimes you do kind of have to take that hit and do a bit of a sideways move, and it will definitely benefit you in the long run if you feel ultimately it's a better fit for you. So when I moved over to Accenture in July 2017, I was really excited. I had seen all the promotions of all the really creative and innovative places Accenture were working, including medtech. But what I didn't realise at the time was that 80% of the business in Ireland was in finance. So a bit naively, I suppose, at the time, joined, but ended up working in the finance sector for 1.5 years, which when I found out first, I felt a bit uncomfortable about. Again, it was total change for me. I didn't know anything about the finance industry. But when I started to get into my projects a bit more, I realised it actually shared some similarities with medtech, in that they were both really highly regulated areas. So particularly my role for the summer doing the MDR and vigilance work was very relevant to me, because in that department it was very heavily audited. So they received about 30 audits a year from different regulatory bodies around the world. So I was really familiar with audit readiness, and I was able to support in a really high profile audit for one of the large Irish banks by the Central Bank of Ireland, which was really great for me in my career. But ultimately I still knew that finance wasn't for me, and I did want to move back toward medtech and pharma. So thankfully in 2019 I got the opportunity to move to a new division that was being set up in Accenture, which was their Life Science Ireland division. And I was promoted to management consultant within the Life Science division in 2019. And I've been working there for the last almost 2 years. So my work there revolves a lot around digital transformation of pharmaceutical companies, which for any of you who have done internships throughout your undergraduate in medtech, you'll be aware that they're actually, while they're very innovative and very future looking on their products, some of their processes are very manual and very paper based, and it's the same in the pharmaceutical industry as well. So it's all about providing digital solutions that will take all of that process off of paper into systems and allow that data to be accessed and used for decision making. So again, it was somewhat similar to my undergraduate and my time in Medtronic. I could definitely pull on a lot of my learning, but the technology aspect was totally new to me. So I decided to do a professional cert in data science through Harvard X. So for me, this was the right decision. It was a technical skill gap and one I needed to fill. My initial reaction was that I would need to do a master's, which I think is most people's kind of gut reaction to further education, is that you need to kind of take a year out and do a master's. But I just wanted to highlight to everyone, you know, there are other options out there. There's part-time options and online options. And with this one, it's particularly unique in that it's offered through a combination of Harvard and data camp. So it's completely self-paced. You watch lectures pre-recorded by Harvard lecturers and do your assignments through data camp. And at the end of the course of the year and a half, you have a professional cert in data science. So I know probably some of you have already got your master's done, and there's always that as well later in life when you find that there might be another area you want to upskill in. There's other options other than the traditional master's. So the other thing I wanted to highlight to you as well is the importance of networks throughout your career. So 3 networks that have been really helpful for me throughout my career is the US Embassy Youth Council, which is open to anyone under the age of 25 if you want to apply, the Junior Chamber International, and of course Engineers Ireland. So what I would recommend to you is to join one network that is directly relevant to your work in your industry, so that you're keeping up to date with the latest trends. Because after you leave college, the landscape changes and you need to make sure you're constantly upskilling, which is a mantra of Engineers Ireland, as well as the focus on continuous professional development. But then I would also try join a network that pushes you out of your comfort zone a little bit, and is maybe not as related to your industry. So what you'll find there is that by meeting other people and hearing what's going on in other industries, you might pick up things that are relevant and could work in the medtech industry. So you can bring them back and kind of use them in a new way, and it keeps your perspective really open as well. So I suppose that's my career. It's been a few twists and turns. The message I really wanted to leave with you all is you can absolutely get into medtech without having an undergraduate in biomed. But as I said, you know, show what you can of where you meet the technical requirements, but also don't be afraid to show what makes you different as well, and what your new fresh perspective could be on the industry. But on the other side of that as well, for those of you who aren't as sure, you've maybe studied medtech at undergraduate level and aren't sure where your career can go, it's also very transferable. I mean, it seems really niche and really technical, but definitely a lot of what you learn is really transferable to other careers as well. So I think I'll hand you back to Michal now for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Valerie. That was really fantastic, and you took us on quite a journey there from medical device engineering to management consultancy. So thank you for sharing your journey with us. I guess I'm going to bring a recording to an end now before we go to the Q&A. So I just want to, on the record, thank all our fantastic panel one more time. It's been a real pleasure having you all this evening. So with that.